Hello and welcome to the World War Lab channel. Today, we are stepping into one of the most decisive and terrifying moments in modern history, a night when silence and darkness concealed the beginning of the largest invasion the world had ever known. June 6, 1944, 015 hours. Strong Point WN-62, Omaha Beach. Gerhard Heinrich Seal methodically cleaned the barrel of his MG-42 machine gun inside a concrete bunker that overlooked the English Channel. The motion was slow and practiced, almost calming. In the pocket of his field jacket, he carried a letter from his girlfriend in Metzingen, a promise written in careful handwriting that she would wait for him until the war ended in victory. He believed in those words, just as he believed in what he had written to her only 3 days earlier. The invasion will be their grave. We will drive them back into the sea within hours. He had penned that line after Field Marshal Erwin Rommel himself had inspected their positions. The Desert Fox had leaned forward, peering through Seal's firing slit, studying the overlapping fields of fire that crisscrossed the beach below. After a long moment, Rommel had nodded with quiet satisfaction. When they come, he had said, this beach will be their cemetery. Now, looking through the embrasure, Seal saw nothing but darkness spread peacefully across the channel. The night was calm, almost beautiful in its stillness. In just 12 hours, this same young man would be found in his bunker, weeping uncontrollably, surrounded by nearly 13,500 empty shell casings, his machine gun barrel twisted and warped from heat, staring at an invasion force so vast that his mind could not accept what his eyes were seeing. Seal would later claim that he had inflicted between 1,000 and 2,000 casualties. Historians, however, regard this as impossible, since total American casualties at Omaha Beach from all causes were approximately 2,400. The truth of German defeat was about to be written not in staff reports or intelligence summaries, but in the stunned testimonies of soldiers who watched the greatest amphibious invasion in human history from the wrong side of their gun sights. The Atlantic Wall stretched nearly 2,400 kilometers from Norway to the Spanish border, a system of fortifications that German propaganda proudly described as the most formidable defensive line ever constructed. Along the coast of Normandy alone, 58 divisions of varying quality manned positions that had consumed roughly 17 million cubic meters of concrete and 1.2 million tons of steel. Hitler himself had declared the wall impregnable. Nowhere did this confidence seem more justified than at Omaha Beach. According to the U.S. Army Center of Military History, the Germans had built 8 concrete bunkers, 35 pillboxes, for artillery positions, 18 anti-tank gun emplacements, 45 rocket launcher sites, 85 machine gun nests, and 6 mortar pits. The beach had been transformed into a killing zone. In the tidal flats, 3,700 obstacles had been planted, including Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, and wooden stakes, many of them fitted with Teller mines. Behind the beach, approximately 6.5 million landmines had been laid, though Rommel had demanded 10 times that number. Colonel Ernst Goff, commanding the 916th Grenadier Regiment near Bayeux, had calculated the potential firepower in his sector alone. His 4 artillery batteries could theoretically deliver 120 rounds per minute onto the beach. Combined with neighboring batteries, the Germans believed they could concentrate devastating fire on any landing force. These calculations, however, depended on one fatal assumption: unlimited ammunition. The weather on June 5th had appeared to confirm German confidence. Luftwaffe meteorologist Walter Stubbe, based in Paris, declared that conditions made an invasion impossible. Winds reached between 20 and 25 knots. Waves climbed to 6 feet. Low clouds hung at just 500 feet. Using data from U-boats and coastal weather stations, Stubbe assured the High Command that these conditions would persist for at least 2 weeks. On the strength of this forecast, many senior officers left their posts. Rommel himself departed for Germany on June 5th to celebrate his wife's birthday, carrying with him a pair of gray suede shoes he had bought in Paris. General Friedrich Dahlmann, commander of the 7th Army, ordered his division commanders to attend war games in Rennes. Even the naval patrols that normally swept the channel were canceled due to the rough seas. This faith in the weather forecast became the first great German miscalculation. Unknown to Stubbe, the Allies possessed weather stations in Greenland and conducted weather reconnaissance flights over the Atlantic. These detected a brief break in the storm system, a narrow 36-hour window identified by Group Captain James Stagg and immediately seized by Eisenhower. At 23:15 hours on June 5th, radar stations along the Normandy coast began detecting unusual activity. Freya and Würzburg radar sets picked up massive aerial formations approaching from the north. The operators were not immediately alarmed. They had seen this before. Allied deception raids meant to keep German forces on edge. But by 0:30 hours on June 6th, reports began pouring in that shattered every assumption. Paratroopers were landing across Normandy. The reports were chaotic and contradictory. Some units claimed landings to the east, others to the west. Some insisted the paratroopers were British, others that they were American. The confusion was deepened by dummy paratroopers fitted with firecrackers, part of Operations Titanic and Rupert, which were designed specifically to spread panic and uncertainty. Major Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment of the 21st Panzer Division, was among the first to grasp the seriousness of what was unfolding. Awakened by reports of airborne landings near his positions, he immediately requested permission to counterattack. The reply from division headquarters was brief and paralyzing. "Do not move until the situation becomes clear." Von Luck would later write in his memoirs, "At that moment, I knew we were lost. The paratroopers were obviously marking the flanks for a major landing. Every minute we delayed allowed them to consolidate, and yet we sat immobilized by our own command structure." June 6, 5:30 hours. As the first gray light spread across the horizon, German observers in forward positions began reporting something for which their training had offered no preparation. In some accounts, a soldier named Verliskart, whose presence at the coast is disputed by historians and even by Seal himself, was among the first to report what he saw. What is beyond dispute is that German observers along the entire Normandy coast witnessed a sight that defied comprehension. From horizon to horizon, the sea was covered with ships. Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands. Vessels of every type and size, from massive battleships to tiny landing craft, stretched across the channel like a vast gray carpet. The invasion fleet consisted of 6,939 vessels, according to official Allied records. Among them were 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 auxiliary and support vessels, and 864 merchant ships. It was the largest naval armada ever assembled in the history of humanity. For German defenders who had been raised on years of propaganda portraying the Allies as weak, divided, and incapable of decisive action, the sight was psychologically crushing. Bernhard Firking, an artillery officer stationed at WN-62, who would be killed later that same day, reportedly turned to his men and told them that they were watching the entire world arrive on their doorstep. At 5:35 hours, the naval bombardment began. Nothing in the experience of the German defenders, not even the brutality of the Eastern Front or the heaviest RAF bombing raids, had prepared them for what followed. The battleship USS Texas alone fired 255 14-inch shells at Point du Hoc in just 34 minutes, according to records from the Naval History and Heritage Command. HMS Warspite, which opened fire on D-Day at approximately 5 o'clock hours, would go on to fire more than 315 15-inch shells over the first 2 days, including 96 rounds directed at German positions on June 9th. The scale and intensity of the combined naval bombardment exceeded anything the Wehrmacht had ever faced. German veteran accounts preserved in the German Federal Archives describe how concrete bunkers, designed to survive any conventional bombardment, began to crack and fracture under the relentless impact of naval gunfire. Men were buried alive by collapsing concrete, dug out by their comrades, only to be buried again as more shells struck. The psychological damage was as severe as the physical destruction. Fortifications that had once inspired total confidence were now disintegrating like sandcastles under a rising tide. As the naval barrage continued, the Luftwaffe's response revealed just how desperate the German situation had become. Oberst Joseph Pips Priller, commanding Jagdgeschwader 26, received orders to attack the invasion fleet with his entire force. His reaction, recorded in the Wings War Diary, was bitterly sarcastic. What entire force? I have 2 planes. The Luftwaffe, which had promised air supremacy over any invasion, managed only 319 sorties on D-Day, compared to 14,674 flown by the Allies. According to U.S. Navy Office of Naval Intelligence records, Priller and his wingman, Heinz Wuderzik, carried out the only Luftwaffe attack on the beaches during the morning of June 6. Flying their FW-190A8 fighters, they made a single strafing run over Sword Beach before being driven off by overwhelming Allied fighter cover. That lone attack, carried out by just 2 aircraft against an invasion force of thousands of ships and tens of thousands of men, became a symbol of German impotence. The promised Knights of the Air, who were supposed to darken the skies and shatter any invasion attempt, had been reduced to a gesture of defiance that changed nothing. At 6:30 hours, the first assault waves reached the beaches. Despite the devastation caused by the bombardment, German defenders emerged from their shelters, took up their positions, and opened fire. What followed was slaughter on a scale that shocked even veterans hardened by years of warfare. Heinrich Seal, the machine gunner at WN-62, began firing at 6:35 hours. His position, one of the few that had survived the bombardment largely intact, commanded nearly perfect field of fire across Omaha Beach. In his 2005 memoir, WN-62, Erinnerungen in Omaha Beach, he stated that he fired approximately 13,500 rounds over a period of 9 hours. Although Seal later claimed to have caused enormous casualties, military historians caution that while his position was undoubtedly lethal, it was only one part of a much larger and more complex killing zone. Precise casualty figures attributable to any single gunner cannot be verified. What is beyond dispute is that his MG-42, capable of firing at a rate of 1,200 rounds per minute in short, devastating bursts, contributed significantly to what will forever be remembered as Bloody Omaha. The German defenders soon began experiencing what military historians later termed material shock, a psychological collapse brought on by exposure to overwhelming and seemingly inexhaustible force. No matter how many Americans, British, or Canadians were cut down, more kept coming. For every landing craft destroyed, 3 more appeared. For every machine gun nest silenced, naval gunfire thundered down with what seemed like infinite ammunition. By midday, German units began reporting catastrophic ammunition shortages. Their defensive plans had been calculated on the assumption of repelling a limited landing. No one had planned for an assault of this magnitude. Supply records show that positions stocked with enough ammunition for 3 days of fighting burned through their reserves in a matter of hours. Artillery batteries, the backbone of the German defensive system, faced the same crisis. Carefully rationed stockpiles disappeared under the intensity of combat. Attempts to bring forward additional supplies failed because every road was under constant attack by Allied fighter bombers. German observers noted the bitter contrast. American destroyers would pour hundreds of shells onto a single target, while by the afternoon of D-Day, German artillery was being restricted to as little as 4 shells per gun per day. Meanwhile, the German Armored Reserve, the force that Rommel had insisted must smash any invasion at the shoreline, remained immobilized during the most critical hours. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armor formation position close enough to respond quickly, did not receive orders to attack until 10 o'clock hours, for hours after the landings had begun. When the division finally advanced at 16:20 hours, it pushed between British airborne landing zones toward the coast. According to divisional records, elements of the 21st Panzer reached the shoreline between Lyon-sur-Mer and Luc-sur-Mer around 1900 hours. becoming the only German armored unit to reach the coast on D-Day. But their success was short-lived. At 2100 hours, they witnessed the arrival of Operation Mallard, 250 gliders delivering reinforcements to the British 6th Airborne Division. Interpreting this massive aerial armada as an immediate threat to their flanks and rear, the German armor withdrew. By the end of the day, the division had lost 54 tanks and armor vehicles, roughly 25% of its total strength, in a single day of combat. The counterattack also exposed German troops to Allied equipment they had never encountered before. Hobart's Funnies, specialized armored vehicles equipped with mine-clearing flails, flamethrowers, and bridge lane devices, appeared almost alien, as if they belonged to an entirely new form of warfare. Throughout D-Day, German units were forced to confront something unprecedented in their experience: an enemy that combined overwhelming manpower, limitless firepower, complete air superiority, and technological innovation on a scale that shattered every assumption upon which their defenses had been built. Airborne forces operating deep behind their lines. The British 6th Airborne Division and the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions created a level of chaos that multiplied their real strength many times over. Oberst Friedrich von der Heydt, Germany's most experienced paratroop commander, who was serving with the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment and happened to be in Normandy during the invasion, later gave a brutally honest assessment in post-war interviews. The Allied airborne operation was everything ours had never been: massive, coordinated, and properly supplied. We dropped battalions. They dropped divisions. We were supplied by a single aircraft. They had endless streams of transport planes and gliders. The psychological effect of paratroopers appearing everywhere at once paralyzed German reactions. Units refused to move, fearing ambushes in every hedgerow and forest. Others fired wildly into the darkness, sometimes even at their own troops. The confusion magnified German problems exponentially. As D-Day continued, German command and control began to collapse completely. Allied aircraft systematically destroyed communication lines. French resistance cells, activated by coded messages broadcast by the BBC, cut telephone cables and demolished relay stations. Radio transmissions were jammed by Allied electronic warfare units. General Major Max Pemsel, Chief of Staff of the 7th Army, tried desperately to coordinate the defense from his headquarters at Le Mans. His war diary records growing frustration as communication with frontline units disappeared. By noon, entire divisions had effectively vanished from the command network. Unit commanders were forced to make decisions in isolation, without any understanding of what was happening beyond their immediate surroundings. As darkness fell on June 6th, surviving German defenders began to grasp the scale of what had occurred. The impregnable Atlantic Wall had been breached in multiple locations. The Luftwaffe had effectively ceased to exist over Normandy. German naval forces had managed to sink only one destroyer, USS Corey, while losing 15 E-boats and numerous smaller vessels in return. General Lieutenant Wilhelm Richter, commanding the 716th Infantry Division, which had borne the full weight of the British assault, reported to 7th Army headquarters. Division combat strength, 35%. All coastal strongpoints lost. Artillery, 90% destroyed. Enemy advancing inland. The statistics told a story of complete tactical failure, despite countless acts of individual bravery. In a single day, German forces had suffered losses equivalent to those of a major campaign, while the Allies continued landing fresh troops and supplies, as if D-Day were merely the beginning, not the decisive climax. Throughout the night of June 6th to June 7th, German units attempted to regroup and mount counterattacks. These efforts only revealed the full extent of Allied dominance. Every German movement was detected by radar, illuminated by flares, and annihilated by artillery or naval gunfire. Hans von Luck's Panzer Grenadiers, finally released a counterattack, advanced towards Sword Beach under cover darkness. In his memoirs, he described what happened next. Parachute flares suddenly turned the night into daylight. Every vehicle, every soldier stood exposed. The shells came from the sea with perfect accuracy. We lost half our strength without seeing a single enemy soldier. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements continued pouring ashore. The artificial mulberry harbors were already taking shape. Supply ships anchored in neat, organized rows. The invasion was no longer just succeeding. It was becoming permanent. As German reinforcements tried to reach Normandy, they encountered total interdiction of movement. Every road, railway, and bridge was under constant attack from the air. According to Wehrmacht transportation records, units that should have arrived at the front in a single day sometimes took up to 2 weeks. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, stationed near Toulouse, required 17 days to reach Normandy, a journey that should have taken only 3. By the time it arrived, the division had lost roughly 30% of its vehicles to Allied air attacks without firing a single shot at enemy ground forces. The psychological effect was devastating. If they could not even reach the battlefield intact, how could they hope to influence the outcome? In stark contrast, Allied logistics operated with breathtaking efficiency. LSTs, landing ship tanks, discharged entire armored regiments within hours. Within days of D-Day, the Allies were landing 15,000 tons of supplies every single day, more than the entire German army in Normandy consumed in a week. By June 12th, German forces in Normandy were approaching psychological collapse. They had lost approximately 26,000 men killed, wounded, or missing, the equivalent of 2 full divisions. Replacements were almost non-existent. At the same time, Allied strength increased hour by hour. Corentin fell on June 12th, linking Utah and Omaha beaches into a single continuous front. The German paratroopers of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, elite soldiers who had never before retreated, pulled back in disorder. Their commander, Friedrich von der Heydt, reported to higher headquarters, "My regiment no longer exists as a fighting unit. The survivors are psychologically broken." On June 13th, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann achieved one of the few German tactical successes of the Normandy campaign. According to British military records, in the Battle of Villers-Bocage, he destroyed between 13 and 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 to 15 armored personnel carriers in roughly 15 minutes. German propaganda seized upon this action as proof that German arms could still prevail. Yet even this victory exposed the hopelessness of Germany's position. Wittmann's Tiger tank, disabled during the battle, was replaced only with great difficulty. The British losses were replaced within hours. Individual brilliance could not overcome the mathematics of industrial warfare. Wittmann himself, credited with 138 confirmed tank kills across all fronts, will be killed on August 8th when his Tiger was destroyed. Whether he was taken out by British gunner Joe Ekins of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry or by Canadian forces remains a matter of historical debate. The Wehrmacht's greatest tank ace had been eliminated by an enemy that could afford to trade 10 tanks for a single Tiger. This reality defined a new balance of power. Another devastating psychological blow followed with the fall of Cherbourg on June 26th. This major port, fortified over 4 years and defended by a garrison of 21,000 men, had been expected to hold out for months. Instead, after only 5 days of heavy fighting, it collapsed. General Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, commanding the garrison, had sworn he would defend Cherbourg to the last bullet. Yet on June 26, he surrendered. In his post-war interrogation, he explained that resistance had become meaningless against an enemy with effectively unlimited resources, a theme that echoed throughout German accounts of the Normandy campaign. Operation Cobra, launched on July 25th, delivered the knockout blow to German forces in Normandy. According to official U.S. Army Air Force's records, the preparatory bombardment involved 1,500 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, and 550 fighter bombers. They dropped more than 4,100 tons of bombs onto a narrow area, just 7,000 yards wide and 2,500 yards deep. General Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, commanding the Panzerlehr Division, reported to Army Group B, My division is annihilated. The psychological effect on the survivors is indescribable. They are no longer soldiers, but broken men. The bombardment was so overwhelming that it killed Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer to die in the European theater, who had been observing from what was believed to be a safe distance. If even American generals were not safe from their own firepower, what chance did German soldiers have? The Falaise Pocket, from August 12th to August 21st, became the graveyard of the German army in Normandy. Allied intelligence reports, later confirmed by German post-war records, estimated that around 10,000 Germans were killed in the pocket and 50,000 were captured. More than 300 tanks and armored vehicles were destroyed, along with approximately 2,500 other vehicles. German soldiers who attempted to escape described scenes of almost apocalyptic destruction. Roads were carpeted with dead horses and burning wreckage. Allied fighter bombers attacked in waves every 20 minutes. Artillery fire never ceased. The destruction was so total that many soldiers simply surrendered, preferring captivity to certain death. The final accounting of the Normandy campaign tells the story of complete German defeat. Between June 6 and August 31st, German losses amounted to approximately 320,000 casualties, around 30,000 killed, 80,000 wounded, and 210,000 missing or captured. About 2,300 tanks were destroyed, virtually the entire armored strength of Germany in France. Roughly 2,127 aircraft were lost. Allied losses, by comparison, were about 29,672 casualties, with replacements arriving faster than losses occurred. Approximately 4,000 Allied tanks were lost, yet they were replaced within weeks. About 4,100 Allied aircraft were lost from a force exceeding 13,000. The disparity revealed a fundamental truth. Germany was fighting a material war. It could not possibly win against an enemy with almost limitless reserves. Professional German officers provided the clearest and most objective assessments of the disaster. General Oberst Johannes Blaskowitz, who assumed command in Normandy after Rommel was wounded, reported to the OKW on August 1st, the enemy's material superiority is at least 20-1 in artillery, 10-1 in tanks, and absolute in aircraft. He can replace all losses within days. We cannot replace anything. General Hans Speidel, Rommel's chief of staff, wrote in his 1949 memoir, "Normandy proved that courage alone could not overcome industrial supremacy. We face an enemy who had mechanized not only warfare, but victory itself." Field Marshal Erwin Rommel left the most powerful testimony of all. In his final report to Hitler on July 15th, just 2 days before being severely wounded by Allied aircraft, he wrote, "The troops are fighting heroically everywhere, but the unequal struggle is nearing its end. The enemy's overwhelming superiority in men and material is beginning to make itself felt. I must beg you to draw the necessary conclusions without delay." In the language of the German High Command, this was an admission of complete defeat. Germany's most celebrated commander was telling Hitler that the war was lost. The Normandy campaign revealed that World War II had become a war of production. German soldiers encountered an American industrial capacity that defied their comprehension. At peak output, Ford's Willow Run plant alone produced one B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. American factories built 96,000 aircraft in 1944. Allied ammunition expenditure in a single day exceeded German production for an entire month. One American division consumed more supplies daily than an entire German corps. Hans von Luck, reflecting on Normandy in his memoirs, wrote, "We learned that modern war was no longer about tactics or courage alone, but about production. The Americans had turned war into an industrial process. They manufactured victory on assembly lines. The German soldiers who survived Normandy were permanently changed. They had witnessed the collapse of everything they'd been taught about warfare, racial superiority, and national destiny." Heinrich Seal, the machine gunner from WN-62, spent the rest of his life haunted by his experiences on D-Day. In his 2005 memoir, he described meeting American veterans years later. "We all realized we had been young men thrown into an industrial slaughterhouse. My 13,500 rounds meant nothing against their unlimited replacements." Friedrich von der Heydt, the former paratroop commander, later became a professor of international law. He wrote, "Normandy taught us that the era of warrior heroes was over. War had become a matter of industrial capacity, and we had challenged the greatest industrial power on earth with horses and outdated dreams." From the German perspective, D-Day was not merely a military defeat. It was a total ideological and psychological collapse. Soldiers who had conquered most of Europe discovered that everything they believed about their enemies, their cause, and their own destiny had been built on illusions. Capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. They had expected to confront weak, divided democracies, nations that would fracture under pressure. Instead, they encountered an alliance that had transformed warfare into an industrial process of overwhelming efficiency. They were witnessing the arsenal of democracy in motion, an endless flow of ships, aircraft, tanks, and supplies pouring from factories whose production capacity was far beyond anything Germany could comprehend. The German defenders in Normandy learned that modern war was no longer decided primarily on the battlefield, but in factories. Victory belonged not to the bravest soldiers, but to the most productive societies. They realized that the Western Allies had fundamentally changed warfare, reducing it to a mathematical equation in which production figures mattered more than tactical brilliance. Industrial output had become the ultimate weapon. Heinrich Seal began June 6, convinced that the invasion would be repelled within hours. He ended the day surrounded by thousands of empty shell casings, watching endless waves of Allied reinforcements pour onto the very beach his position was meant to dominate. His experience reflected the greater German tragedy in Normandy. Local, tactical success was drowned in strategic impossibility. No matter how deadly his fire, no matter how disciplined the defense, it could not overcome the infinite depth of Allied resources. The beaches of Normandy became more than a battlefield. They became a revelation. German soldiers saw the future of warfare, and it belonged to the nations that could produce the most material and apply it with the greatest efficiency. They had arrived with courage, training, and unwavering determination. The Allies had arrived with unlimited industrial power. In attempting to stop the Allied invasion, the German defenders might as well have been trying to hold back the ocean itself. They fired until their gun barrels glowed and warped from heat. They fought until their ammunition was exhausted. And still the Allies continued to arrive, bringing more men, more machines, more firepower, and more supplies without pause. The mathematics of modern war had rendered individual courage irrelevant. The German soldiers who faced D-Day learned one of history's harshest lessons. In the age of industrial warfare, any nation that could not match its enemy's production was destined to lose, regardless of the skill, discipline, or sacrifice of its soldiers. They began June 6th as warriors of the Third Reich and ended it as witnesses to the arsenal of democracy in its full, terrifying efficiency. Their defeat was not merely military. It was total. It was a crushing demonstration that the Nazi vision of racial superiority and absolute military dominance had collided with the reality of Allied industrial supremacy and shattered completely. The invasion they had sworn to drive back into the sea did not retreat. Instead, it swept over them, carrying away the final illusions of German victory.